shadow of Mordor. You are Talion, a ranger of Gondor and a guardian of the Black Gates, until the night Sauron and his black captains returned to Mordor, killing everyone you've ever loved and leaving you for dead.
We are here in London, seeing the first glimpse of Middle-earth: Shadow of Mordor, which is looks like quite a nice action RPG. Can you give us the setting of the game?
Oh yeah, sure. So it's a third-person, open-world action game, and it's set entirely in Mordor, and it takes place just after the end of The Hobbit and sort of 60 years before Lord of the Rings.
And we have a completely new main character for the franchise. What can you tell us about the new hero?
So there's really sort of basically two characters to our hero, or two sides. One half of him is Talion. He was a ranger of Gondor, and he was deployed on the Black Gates of Mordor, where Gondor has been guarding the frontiers for 2,000 years and was completely unprepared for Sauron's return. And so Talion is killed, and then he's brought back. He's not allowed to sort of find peace by a Wraith, and that's the other half of the character, who's really a separate character and whose identity we'll learn as we sort of go through the story and find out how that's connected to Sauron's return and so on.
So the identity of the Wraith half is a big mystery for the game.
Yeah, absolutely, and is I think very, very key to understanding sort of, I think, the big picture of where these powers come from, why Talion has been brought back, how they're ultimately going to face Sauron, and how this ties into the larger history of Middle-earth.
What kind of powers does this Wraith persona give Talion?
So when we think of powers, we very much think of power in the same way that kind of Tolkien talks about power, as in the Rings of Power. So it's the ability to see into the unseen world, sort of the spirit world or the Wraith world, and to manipulate things within there. And also the power to bend and dominate the will of sort of weaker characters, so either through terror or really through overwhelming them, and as we see sometimes with the Ringwraith, the ability to operate into the physical world, so to actually affect the physical world and fight and battle as well.
We did see a large chunk of the Nemesis gameplay, and it gave the character quite a lot of intimidation and domination. So what can you tell about those kind of abilities?
So as you grow in power, and as we sort of learn more of who the Wraith is, you really do actually gain the ability to take your enemies and bend them to your will. So basically to start building your own force, building your own army to challenge your enemies with. And so as we get later into the game, not only can you take those enemies, bend them to your will, because of the way the open world works and the sandbox works, you can actually send them out to perform missions as well. So you can send them on assassination missions if you like, or you can send them on other missions in the sandbox so they can level up, or send them out to gather more followers and so on. So there's a whole really opens up more possibilities within the world of giving you more freedom of how to go after your targets and manipulate the world.
Yeah, we saw some ranking up of the enemies, especially when the player died. You saw that some of the orcs rose in the ranks. Mm-hmm. So can we see what kind of changes in the orc behavior or like abilities can we see?
So basically any enemy in the world, any grunt, through either killing the player perhaps or killing another orc, has the ability to get promoted. When they get promoted, one of the main things that will happen is they'll grow in power, and they'll continue to level up. So they have a combination of abilities. Some are strengths, some are weaknesses. As they grow more powerful, they can lose their weaknesses, they can gain more strength, so they can get sort of very tough indeed. Plus they get assigned different jobs within Sauron's army, and that will affect where you can find them in the world. So whether they're cooks or whether they're trainers or whether they're trackers, there's enemies that will hunt you instead of waiting for you to hunt them. So a whole host of different jobs, strengths and weaknesses, and then different missions that they can be going on within the world as well. They could be doing anything from throwing a feast to hunting down monsters to battling against each other, and then sort of the ultimate goal for these guys is they can really become the the sub-bosses in the world, you know, sort of the major villains or personal villains, which is the war chiefs. So they can get put in charge of different strongholds in the world, and then they get their own bodyguards, and then you're actually kind of fighting a group of these really powerful enemies simultaneously.
How would you describe the Nemesis system? Is it like a side mission, or is it like a full compassing system? That how does it affect the single player, or I mean the story, main story?
Yeah, so how we sort of tie together the Nemesis system and the main story, spend a lot of time on, because the story is a very authored story. You know, we have discrete story missions, and the story's carried forward, but at certain points we really bring the story and the procedural gameplay of the Nemesis system together. So at some points, to advance the story, you have to eliminate and assassinate the war chiefs in this area. So we're kind of handing you from the story into the sandbox, and then playing in the sandbox, and then that advances the story, and then we come back. And in the same way, later in the game, when you're sort of building up your own force to challenge Sauron, again, we're handing you from some really key events of the story and growing in power and learning about the Wraith, back to using those powers within the sandbox. So we try and not make the two things feel totally separate, but make them integrated and make them support each other at some key points. And then ultimately, out of the Nemesis system, we really want you to make your ultimate arch enemy, and take this guy who's actually procedurally created, but put him back into the story in a way that's meaningful as well.
All right. You mentioned that it's a sandbox. Can you a little bit? Many people are probably like interested. How big is the sandbox going to be? And we saw a lot of like visually, a lot of desolation, yep, and gray and brown shades of coloring. Are we going to see any variation to that?
So what we showed today was Udun, which is sort of the most, immediate area just inside Mordor, and in some ways the most familiar looking. I don't think, we're not going to be the sort of hugest sandbox in the world. We're really concentrating much more on what's the density of things that ultimately we can put in there, so of life and of exploration and of discovering secrets and the history of Mordor and caves and so on. But then the other areas that you do explore, then we really want to find variety. But in a way that makes Mordor even more of a real place versus what we've seen before. So, how do they feed these massive armies of tens of thousands of orcs? There have to be, lush fields or growth in places. And so really trying to maximize between the different locations we do go to is really having maximum variety between them.
All right. Well, thank you very much for the interview, and we'll end here in London.
Run, you filth! And tell your master I am coming!
Yes. Let them carry word back to Sauron. When he comes for us, our pawns will be in place, and all Mordor will burn.